Thank you. So just to advise everybody, the meeting's open to the public. Committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings online, and the usual rules apply to anybody in the public gallery in relation to phone usage and Wi-Fi. Apologies, we have none. Chair's business. I have just a few items of Chair's business that I want to raise. And if people want to come in at the end, that's fair enough. So we had the Independent Autism Reviewer report launched this week, and I mean, like a lot of these reports, it's pretty pessimistic reading in terms of service provision and matching what the department are committing to and actually delivering on. So I mean, I know we get regular updates from the Independent Autism Reviewer. I think we need to keep a closer eye on those to ensure that we as a scrutiny committee can play our part in ensuring adequate progress is developed, and that the people out there, autistic people out there, get the service provision that they deserve. I want to also mention the Bowel Cancer UK event that was up in room 115 the other day. Obviously here in the north we're much further behind in terms of screening than other parts of these islands, and I mean, I think this committee should be supporting the call for screening to be reduced to the age of 50, and if people are happy I would be suggesting that we write to the Minister. Okay, we did.
During the waiting list briefing.
Okay, so it was raised last week, so I mean that I just want to commend that event. Thirdly, I just want to put on record our thanks to the department for the briefing this week on This Is Your Health. So I mean, this is an initiative the department are rolling out to engage the public to try and improve public health out there. So I mean, I think in theory it is a really good initiative, and I mean, I would like that the committee here and certainly MLAs individually and collectively would do our best to raise and support that. There's going to be road shows in various parts across the north, so hopefully we can contribute to publicising that on our social media. It's basically the department engaging with the public and trying to gain access and insights into how we can all work together to keep people away from health settings if we can, and public to take some responsibility for their own health. The fourth thing that I want to just raise is myself and Danny before the committee had an engagement in Belfast City Centre at the Extern Needle Exchange Centre. So I mean, they wanted to highlight just the work that they do, which I think is extremely useful work in terms of an advanced needle exchange centre where people can come in, drug users can come in and get needle exchange. And I mean, it is a very vital service in terms of keeping people safe and alive. There's a concern now because it's along that row where that and also their service in terms of homeless is going. Belfast City is for redeveloping that, so they've been told they're going to be moved out, which is fair enough, but there's some issue with getting them a suitable place. So myself and Danny met with them. I asked them if they wrote formally to the committee in advance of next week's committee meeting, just outlining their concerns and their issues and what they would like us to do in terms of help. Then we would consider that as a committee next week. And then lastly, just in terms of chair business, we'll all have received the Minister's written statement today in terms of the mother and baby unit at the Belfast City Hospital. So I think it's important to say that, put on record, that the mother and baby unit is absolutely long overdue. So today's announcement is welcome. As we know, women and families experiencing severe perinatal mental illness deserve a safe environment that allows them to remain with their babies while receiving the care that they need. With that in mind, the announcement of the new facility is really good. In the Minister's letter, he's saying it should be built and open by the year 28-29, but in the interim, support for mothers and babies hasn't been agreed, and I think that's a limitation in terms of the Minister's statement today. So, I mean, I think as a committee, we should be urging the Minister to ensure that there are no further delays in the project. First of all, to get the new mother and baby unit open, that it's fully funded, but also to outline to this committee and to the Assembly how mothers who need that care are going to be supported in the meantime. I think the committee will also rightly want to ask the Minister, just given in light of recent briefings here with Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, to outline a definitive timeline for the project, definitive costs for the project, and also what oversight mechanisms the department will have in terms of the construction of the project, so that we can ensure that there are lessons learned from other similar capital projects within the Belfast Health and Trust region. So that's a number of items there. People may have some commentary. Nuala?
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. It was on the mother and baby home unit announcement. I welcome that it seems that it will go quicker than schedule. Of course, we'll just wait and see with everything that's been going on with the maternity. But it is welcome that the department has and the trust have taken a more focused look. However, I do think that if we could ask for specific reasons as to why it's been outlined that interim measures wouldn't be possible, because I know in other regions they were able to have a step up interim measure units. And I know that there are clinical reasons why, but it would be helpful if actually it was outlined. Is it because there is no staff to fill it, or is it because it's not safe with buildings? Just if there could be a bit more input than the kind of the clinical decision line that was in there.
Okay, so is everybody content that we write to the Minister, or the Department and the Minister, to ask those questions? Okay, so moving on then, draft minutes. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of April, page 6. Are members content with the minutes as drafted? Matters arising? None. Okay. Item number 5, SL1, which is the JAM and Similar Products Amendment Regulations, NI 2026. So the SL1 papers are at page 20 to 34 of our main pack. The Food Standards Agency is proposing to make a statutory rule. The purpose of the proposed rule is to provide an updated compositional requirements for jelly and extra jelly. Food Standards Agency has written to the committee to explain that due to an oversight during the development of the previous SR on breakfast foods, which we agreed in January, it didn't specifically provide compositional requirements for jelly and extra jelly, whereas it did for jam and extra jam. So in order to fully comply with the relevant EU directive, an additional SR is required to amend to the jam and similar products regulation. The specific differences between jam, extra jam, jelly and extra jelly are set out on the FSA's papers, and as a previous chair of the Windsor Framework Committee, I'm an expert now in the differences between jam and jelly. So this is the first occasion the committee has seen the SL, and we will not make a decision about the policy merit of the proposed rule at today's meeting. So in terms of ask of members, what I'm asking is that we note the SL1 information and papers will be published on the Assembly website, and a call for views will be issued. Also look on agreement that the SL1 will be scheduled for consideration at the meeting on the 21st of May, and then just to ask if members want to be briefed by the Food Standards Agency on the proposed rule. And also if there's any other information members want to support our consideration of the rule at the meeting on the 21st of May. So, no. It's a fairly straightforward amendment. I mean, I'm not sure we need to bring members of the FSA here to it. The papers are pretty self-explanatory, if people are content with that. Okay, happy to agree or proceed as agreed. Okay, item number 6. So, oral briefing from NICCY, the mental health research report. So can I refer members to page 35 of the main pack, which includes the report and addendum. So just going to welcome her. Also, can I welcome Mr. Chris Quinn, who's the Commissioner for Children and Young People, Leah Rea, Policy and Research Officer, and also, I'm going to butcher this name, Elodie Bloomer, who's a youth panel member. So you are all very welcome. Apologies, Elodie. Hopefully I got that name pronounced correctly. So thank you very much to all of you. We've received your briefing. So I'm happy to hand over to yourself just for some brief introductory remarks, and then we'll go straight to questions from members.
Great. Well, look, thank you. I'll not do the introductions in the interest of time, but just by way of opening remarks, to thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. As Commissioner for Children and Young People, my statutory duty under the 2003 order is very clear, and that is to safeguard and promote the rights and best interests of children and young people, and to advise government and relevant authorities on law, policy and practice affecting those rights. So in doing so, I am guided by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which requires that every child has access to high quality healthcare services, including mental health support. So this is the first time that I've been in front of committee during my term in office, and the focus of today's conversation is on our latest report into infant, child and youth mental health. However, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge my concerns with regarding some of the broader issues, including the visibility of babies, children and young people in health transformation generally, as well as concerns that relate to children's social care, topics that I know you've discussed and relate to the issues that we will be discussing today. So child and youth mental health is an issue that has for a long time been a key concern for me, both throughout my career in youth work, and it has continued to be a significant focus since the beginning of my term in office in September 2023. As Commissioner for Children and Young People, I have consistently heard from young people and families with regards to long waiting times, barriers in accessing support, feeling unheard, and deterioration of need before help is given. These themes are strongly echoed in our report entitled A System at a Crossroads. I should acknowledge that there are many committed and hard-working individuals working within government, statutory agencies and voluntary organisations, and indeed the Minister for Health himself has for a long time advocated for improvements to mental health systems and services, and this is to be welcomed. I am, however, very sorry to say that this report highlights that we haven't seen the required level of progress since we published our last report called Still Waiting in 2018. Our key findings include that the voices of children and young people are not systematically embedded in mental health planning and service design. Participation is inconsistent and often tokenistic. Children and young people report not being listened to when in crisis or involved in decisions about their own care or wider service planning. Given the importance of young people's voices, Elodie has taken time out of her schedule today. And I should add that this is a big day in Elodie's academic calendar, and that she skipped out of the end of year assembly to be here. So look, fair play to you, Elodie. And we are really delighted that you're able to join us. But we felt it was important that a young person was here to give you their views and experiences of the issues that we're talking about today. And before I do pass to Elodie, who I'm sure you'll be much more interested in than myself, some of the things that I want to impress on the committee today include the need for stronger, better defined early intervention and support, including infant and maternal mental health, the need for functional regional crisis services, improvements in data capture and sharing, improvements in school and community-based support, and improvements in transitions between CAMHS and adult services. So Chair, Vice Chair and members, I have been there, as I'm sure many of you have, and I know many of you have, in supporting children and young people in crisis, in emergency departments caring for vulnerable young people, often sitting through the night in hospitals with people in severe crisis who desperately need a bed, with young people who have a plan to end their lives, only at times to be sent home with a leaflet. No words are needed to express how alarming these situations are and the urgency that we must apply to improving mental health services for babies, children and young people. So I hope that we can work with you to make things better. And I would now like to pass to Elodie to offer you her perspective.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you so much for the ability to be here today and I feel so refreshed as a young person to know that there are adults and politicians that are keen to make an impact on something that I feel so passionately about. Our NICCY report, A System at a Crossroads, shows worrying trends in young people's access to mental health care. Services are clearly overstretched and under-resourced. The practical difficulty in accessing even a GP appointment means that we, as young people, are falling through the growing cracks of a fractured system. The mental health of our young people in Northern Ireland reflects the health of our services. It is the worst in the UK. Our generation has grown up in a virtual world that has isolated us more than connected us. We face academic pressure from the age of 10 due to the ritual humiliation of academic selection, arguably tattooing our self-belief for life. And we know that our hope of achieving a job, home, and family is harder to achieve now than for the generations before us. Some of us suffer generational trauma. Our boys are particularly at risk of suicidal ideation and completed suicide. Waiting lists are long, and help is increasingly only offered when a threshold of peril is reached, making recovery harder. The further we are allowed to fall, the more difficult it is to climb back up again. And the safety net of our mental health services is threadbare. That we lack a first-class, quality mental health support system is not just potentially negligent and embarrassing for one of the most developed countries in the world, it is also economically foolish. Young people are the future of Northern Ireland. We are needed to build a strong economy. Our report makes 31 recommendations to improve the current stagnation in mental health services, and I urgently seek your help in ensuring that children's health rights are upheld, that children are listened to, treated, and protected, that staff are supported, and that fair and efficient funding is provided. A plaster isn't going to fix the equivalent of a life-threatening laceration, and our critically wounded mental health services need reconstructive surgery. I believe in viable common sense and economic options that could proactively help to protect our youth mental health from the beginning of our lives. I would appeal to the Department of Health to join forces with the Department of Education to provide the following. Firstly, a comprehensive education on mental health within the school environment from primary school level. This must be on a mandatory curricular basis. We need to know the early physical and emotional signs that mental health issues can manifest as. Building a trauma-informed approach into school in relation to pupil behaviour empowers and builds resilience. School nurses should be trained to identify mental health issues by looking at signposts such as sleep duration, use of social media, mood levels, appetite, to help us to have some awareness of our risk factors. Assessment should be frequent, proactive, and comprehensive so that effective early intervention is available. Young people must be listened to and be involved in their own healthcare at all stages of treatment. I feel that continuous early curriculum-based mental health education would also combat the stigma. Secondly, mental health as part of the physical education curriculum. I appreciate the RAISE Active School programme that is being introduced by the Department of Education, but many more small yet effective changes could be introduced into school, such as 10-minute meditations, the adoption of a 1-kilometre daily jog, introducing yoga as part of PE. The elite focus on sporting achievement within school often quashes our confidence and belief in our body's ability at a very early age. The not good enough ethos makes many pupils bow out of sport completely if they haven't made the team. Sport is for life, and this is not properly taught by schools who want the glory of trophies. A real school championship winning outcome would be instilling a love of lifetime sport for all pupils, with elite tournament success being a close silver medal. Thirdly, provide healthful foods in canteens and educate us about the recognised gut biome and mental health link. Teach us more consistently about healthy eating and the risks of processed foods, vaping, smoking, drugs and alcohol addictions on our long-term mental health. Comprehensive sexuality and relationship education is crucial for young people to understand what healthy family, friend and partner relationships look like. It is impossible to know if we are in relationships that are sound in their interactions if we have no mirror to hold this up against. We can only ever know our own normal, but what if this normal is abusive or unhealthy? Internet and social media education. As a member of the NSPCC Voice of Online Youth, I've worked on the undeniable connection of excessive social media use and negative mental health outcomes. Health misinformation is also a problem. Navigating safe online use needs to be taught as part of the curriculum. Further, the internet could be utilised to safely provide regulated youth mental health support through online services such as CBT, counselling and advice. I also believe that more could be done to properly assess how the limited mental health budgets are spent in practice. By fully spending budgets, ring-fencing funding, looking at value for money initiatives and making savings, we are fortunate that Northern Ireland still has a family, community and voluntary heart that help people when services fail. The value to the person and economically to the state is immense. The importance of these support systems must be recognised and upheld. The failure of our Assembly and Government to immediately address the failings in our mental health services is a clear breach of Article 24 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Our NICCY report shows that we, as young people, are not getting what we are entitled to under Article 24, the best possible quality mental health care. The UNCRC must be adopted into domestic law to safeguard the mental health of our young people as an actionable legal right. Many children believe in magic. Although I am still a child, I put my belief in the UNCRC. I hope that you will too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's us. Over to you now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much, Chris, and thank you in particular, Elodie. That was extremely powerful. Your parents, I'm sure, are quite rightly proud of you. We hear a lot of evidence here on a weekly basis, and that was extremely powerful. What I'm going to ask, if it's possible, that we get a copy of your presentation, and I think that we will forward that on to both the Department of Health and the Department of Education, so that they are hearing
Thank you so
directly.
much.
So, thank you very much for that. Just we'll go straight to questions then, and you can answer them, whoever you think is the most appropriate. So, I mean, last week we talked about the launch of the Mental Health Champions report, and that was very bleak reading in terms of the overall access to services and how the mental health strategy was resourced in comparative to outcomes, etc. So, I mean, this is another pretty bleak day here for citizens, particularly children and young people in the north, when we have a growing mental health crisis. So, I mean, this evidence is extremely important. I mean, I want to kind of delve a bit into the impact on our young people. So, I mean, you're saying that young people are having to wait over 9 weeks for a first appointment. So, I mean, what kind of an impact is that having on these young people, the extremely lengthy wait for even a first appointment?
Yeah, and please do, Leah, jump in here. Leah was the author of this latest research, and it is a quite thorough piece, as you know, and Elodie, please jump in as well. But in terms of the impact, I suppose when in my introduction there, I said that we hadn't seen the improvements that we wanted to see since the Still Waiting report was published in 2018. And in fact, you could say that things have got worse. You know, we had COVID-19 in the middle of that. But the impact is stark. You know, you're talking about young people and children and families in crisis and simply not getting the support they need. And what I should say from talking to families and the young people, they're very quick to tell me that CAM services, when you're in, it's very good. But it's difficult. There's difficulty with regards to getting into the service, and those waiting lists you'll know all too well about. But the waiting times, and maybe you want to come in here as well. The waiting times is an issue, and you'll know this too, because if a child is in crisis, they need help now, and that wait can be devastating. And as I say, that crisis support, and what we've seen as well is the thresholds. The threshold for support getting higher, so that crisis and the crisis intervention. So that's why we talk a lot about the need for early intervention support and community-based. We've seen in other jurisdictions, and I think the mental health champion has referred to Scotland a few times as where there's examples of good practice. But in terms of the research itself, Leah, and the impact that it's having, maybe you want to come in there just to say a few words.
Certainly, and also just to echo what our Commissioner and Elodie has said, thank you so much for having us here today. I suppose I want to start from the precedent that as of March 2024, which was our end point for our data collection, we know that 1,990 children and young people were waiting. And of that, 51.5% were waiting longer than 9 weeks. So that's over 1,026 children. Now, we know figures have changed since March 24, but I would suspect we're still sitting somewhere in that cusp. Our mental health care pathway guidance states that no one should wait longer than 9 weeks to access services. So when we know at March 24 there were 1,026 children who had gone past that 9-week threshold.
Do we know the longest waiting list that children may be experiencing?
Well, the Northern Ireland Audit Office in its 2023 report stipulated that the longest waiting list for CAMS as of 2023 was over 500 days.
Okay.
Now, that would be at the most extreme end. The data sets in our report would identify we're talking more, it very much depends on the trust region that you're examining, but it really would be more than at least 13 to 20 to 26 weeks. But the period of time also can extend beyond 52 weeks. The impact of that would be, in the first instance, a child or young person feeling they are stuck languishing and they cannot access the medical support and intervention they require. What we usually do see is that in the absence of having a diagnosis, there can be no suitable care pathway put in place, no management, no support. That also then can extend into the educational context for children and young people. There may not be the opportunity to have a diagnosis shared that could provide them for example, reasonable adjustments within their educational setting, including in public examinations. But left untreated, essentially, you will have children and young people, whether they are presenting with feelings of anxiousness, other aspects of emotional dysregulation, they are left feeling that cannot be contained. They don't know how to manage it, and they don't feel that statutory services are available for them. What we do see in terms of trying to mitigate that impact is, and I think our report does demonstrate this, it's the impact of the community and voluntary care sector who really step in to fulfil those cracks. But they are underfunded and they are constrained by that too. But this extends into the child's social life, extends and also into their social and emotional development and growth. And research does show us that at the end point of their teenage years, entering into early adulthood, children and young people could see their public examinations affected, they don't receive the marks they need, or they could end up as a NEET, so not in education, employment or training post-18. We also see evidence from England really demonstrating how that's increased, and we would assume the figures are similar here. So it's very much something that spreads not just in that medical healthcare clinical setting, it goes into the child's social emotional life, it goes into their educational settings, and then will extend into their employment prospects after they leave school.
That's a very good point that you're making. I would also assume, even in terms of their mental health, early intervention would potentially allow for less intervention needed later on in life if we can get early intervention. But the points about its impact on academic and employment further down the line is a point well made. Elodie very eloquently outlined, a number of the issues, the eating disorders, the sport, and the sexual health, all of those things. Has there been any engagement between yourselves and the department in terms of the report and outcomes, and what kind of engagement? Is it positive engagement? Do you feel that the department are taking the issue seriously and are actively working to try and address some of them?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. Now, what's normal with the process when we publish a report, we will give the department an opportunity to sort of fact check and look at the data that we're presenting. So that has happened. Then we publish, and following publication we had a roundtable of key stakeholders within the mental health system, including Department for Health officials and CAMS and that there. We have had correspondence just this week actually in terms of the report itself and what we're recommending. So next steps will be a meeting with health officials and then a meeting with the Minister and PermSec. I don't know if you want to add to that, Leah, do you?
I suppose just to add to that, the Department of Health officials, the SPPG officials who have very kindly provided us with the data for which we undertook the report on, have made clear as part of that data release that they are under financial constraints or budgetary pressures, and we're very cognizant of that. And I suppose we're hoping to explore further, as the Commissioner's outlined, in future engagement, where exactly are departmental priorities, just because we know off the back of their own publication around the deliverability of the mental health strategy in October last year, they're using a prioritisation model, and we're concerned where children and young people's services lie in that model. So I would think, yes, there's been a open and constructive dialogue, which we're hoping to continue with in the months to come.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it would be useful when those meetings take place that perhaps the committee would get an update, just so that we can help and assist any further work that's needed. And as I say, we will pass on Elodie's remarks, because I think they're particularly powerful, to both the Department of Education and the Department of Health, and ask for a response, which we will make sure that you get. Going to now bring in some other members. Colin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Elodie, for that presentation, and Chris and Leah for the report. It's good to see the detail and the evidence that's there. But also, I think we really should give some recognition to the simplicity of much of what Elodie was suggesting in terms of ideas, and many of those ideas and suggestions that are being offered, they're not things that are going to cost money. We know that maybe when it comes to waiting lists and clinical interventions, that there may be finance for that, but some of those simple things that could be changed in school daily practice and other examples about healthy eating, these are all the small things that all add up together. So it's been good to hear those, and also good, Chair, for your recommendation that we should send those speeches on to the department so that they can see some of the simple quick wins that they could be implementing. But maybe if I could ask you that, the report does have a lot of detail in it, and it does detail a lot of the issues. Is there any thought given to, are there any priorities amongst those issues, or some that maybe are the most pressing that you would like to see being addressed as quickly as possible?
Yeah, and look, please do jump in here, colleagues. But I think for me, Colin, the things that stick out to me include infant mental health, and I'm really glad actually to say that since the publication of the report, PHA have published the infant mental health framework. So that was published right after our report was published. So I do think we need to put more emphasis on early intervention. We need to define what we mean by early intervention, but I think more focus on maternal mental health and infant mental health. For me, a glaring hole or massive urgency is around crisis support and a regional crisis support model. And I can talk more about this if you wish, but just, yourself, Colin, from working in the sector for years, often that crisis support is best or most efficiently provided by community sector organisations, which is another area that we need to delve into a little deeper. Transitions is huge. We see massive issues with children transferring from child services to adult services, and a big thing that I have across lots of areas that I look at is data capture, data sharing. I think we need to do better at capturing data, but we also need to use the data that we have at our disposal much more effectively and efficiently. I know that Encompass is part of that discussion as well. But we also need to think about how different departments and bodies talk to each other and share data. But look, Leah, Elodie, please jump in terms, from your perspective, what are the big headline issues?
I think, just to echo what our Commissioner has said, if we frame it around a mental health strategy delivery, it's specifically actions 12 and 13 where we would have the most concern. Obviously, when it comes to establishing that regional mental health crisis system or service, or also trying to figure out how we deal with transitions between CAMHS and Delta mental health services, that will take time, that does take planning. But for us, what we're concerned about and what's reflected in our report, those actions seem to have stalled, and we would just be very grateful to have a better appreciation from the department and relevant colleagues as to their plans in these areas, because as the Commissioner's outlined, crisis is an issue. But we also see issues very much with children, young people who are 14, 15, 16 who do not know what services will be in place for them when they turn 18, 19 and age out of CAMHS. When you don't have that stability and service support, you feel you can't understand where your life will be. It has knock-on repercussions. But I think what our report also demonstrates, and Elodie so nicely put out as well in her opening comments, is the role of using international law and international standards, embedding that within strategic policy frameworks and within approaches. The use of a child's rights-based approach for any future policy delivery would be a quick and easy win. And just trying to ensure that actions are measurable, we have relevant indicators as would be outlined in international law, but trying to understand what do we mean by the highest attainable standard of health for our children and young people under Article 24, and seeing that embedded more thoroughly in official guidance, but also specifically strategic frameworks.
Yeah, and could I just add, just if I may, and Elodie, you may want to speak about this, but something that young people have called for a long time is a curriculum for life, a curriculum that, and you did touch on this, Elodie, with regards to how important you think that aspect. Would you like to talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I know, like for me, in school there's such a focus on maths or English, but in reality, I feel like I won't be needing fractions, I won't be needing poetry in a couple of years, but everyone will experience mental health issues at some point or another, and this curriculum needs to be embedded at such an early stage that it's just like a normalised, like now I think there's such a stigma around getting mental health support, but having this at such an early age, and that will just really, I think, help young people's mental health overall.
Thank you, Elodie.
I suppose the separatist nature of our executive and health and education being a part of it, maybe our role is to say, as a committee, and maybe this is something that we could consider afterwards, is sort of writing to the Department of Education to say, look, we can see the deficits in health because you aren't doing what you could be doing in education, because it's rather than constantly saying, well, we just have to leave it to them. We have to say, well, look, it's actually impacting the area that we scrutinise because you're not doing something. And as Elodie has pointed out in her presentation, that some of those things are quite simple, including it in a curriculum-based approach. It wouldn't be a massive amount over the 14 years that young people can be in education. That's at some point on a curriculum, we give every child some form of information and support and guidance in terms of their mental health. And picking up, I think we should ask as well, Leah, about that issue. If things have stalled, I think it's important that we try and pick those things out and find out why they've stalled. And my final question then just is, I am interested because we have heard again about, the UN Charter and rights, and I know that we've mentioned that a lot. And Elodie, you being here today brings a tear to my eye in terms of the all-party group and youth participation. Having young people here talking about young people's issues is the way that it should be. So that's great to see. But it's often referenced there about the UN Charter on the rights of children and how we don't have that here. So can you explain, why do we not have it here, and what is our deficit here for not having that?
You want me to start and you can follow, because I know you're passionate about this.
Yeah, definitely.
I suppose, Colin, my position on this is that we need to fully incorporate the UNCRC into domestic law. And as Leah has outlined, I think that would be the single most impactful thing that our Assembly could do for children, because it would switch the dial in terms of how we spend our money, in terms of how we plan our services, and how we take that child's rights approach. And in fact, I looked, just in preparation for this meeting, I looked at what's been happening in Scotland, because they incorporated not so long ago, and Together Scotland published a report, I think it was February, March time, and within that report there's 63 case studies as to the impact incorporation has made to date, and I was able to pick out some examples of how there has been a shift away. So there was one particular case study about the importance of early intervention and a shift away from waiting lists towards prevention and early intervention. There was other examples of trauma-informed practice. So we're seeing the impact. I think your question is why we don't have that approach right now. I think for me, we need our assembly to kind of to buy into child's rights budgeting, child's rights impact assessments, and look, I know there's difference of opinions on international treaties such as the UNCRC, but for us, it would bring a lot of solutions to the table. Elodie, you'd indicated that you might have wanted to speak about this.
Yeah, definitely. And as a young person with awareness of rights and of the UNCRC, I just feel so passionately about this being implemented into domestic law. And often the case, it's just because you should do something doesn't necessarily mean that you will do it. And I think there can always be various reasons or justifications argued against doing something for the greater good, such as lack of funding, bigger priorities, etc. And thus, it seems to be the way for our health services here. Obligation and accountability, in my opinion, are the two biggest arguments for incorporation of the UNCRC. If our public authorities legally had to provide the basic recommendations under Article 24 in the UNCRC, it is pretty likely that children and young people's mental health services would be found lacking. The critical improvements that our NICCY report shows are needed would instead be legally required, and that change could fundamentally save so many young people's lives and improve them. As it is, these lives remain imperiled and in the worst case reality, potentially lost. Northern Ireland is a developed country in 2026. I shouldn't have to sit here and beg for the highest attainable standard of health as it is required in Article 24 for my fellow young people, but I will. Please use all your influence in this committee to lead Northern Ireland to incorporation of the UNCRC. And this not for me, but for your own children, for your grandchildren. Similarly to what Chris was saying, look to Scotland's politicians for the due respect that they have shown to their future adults. Like, every Scottish politician voted for it. They have a 2-year head start on us in improving and in saving young people. At best, we're playing catch up. At worst, I'm concerned that we are not even currently in the game. By incorporating the UNCRC, Northern Ireland would fundamentally change what being a child and what being a young person would look like here. And that is not just restricted to just healthcare. What might today be considered luck of the draw, privileges for some children that often result from wealth, social position, or a lot of the time because of who they know, it will become fundamental rights applicable to all children and young people. Fairness and equity will prevail, giving us all a chance, and not just those lucky few from the draw. Incorporation would proactively place children's rights at the very heart of all future decisions, policy formation, service provision and budgets, and it's not just the incorporation of Article 24 that will markedly improve mental health outcomes for young people. Article 19 will guarantee that children will be protected from violence, abuse and neglect. Article 27 will guarantee our right to an adequate standard of living. Article 12 will guarantee our right to be heard. So as you can see, these all will directly or indirectly improve young people's mental health one way or another. And these are just a snapshot of the rights that individually and collectively would massively protect and improve mental health outcomes for young people. So incorporation is so important, and thank you so much for listening.
Well done.
Thank you. I think the question that comes from that there is why wouldn't we incorporate it? Because it's about not protecting all of those things. But thank you very much for the answers, and thank you, Chair.
Yeah, very powerful argument. I'm not sure anybody could disagree with that. Nuala.
Hello, everyone, and Elodie, just want to say well done on presenting here this morning. It's not always that we have a person under the age of 18 in front of a health committee, but you did fantastic, and I really did enjoy listening to your presentation at the start. I wish I had as much confidence as I did when I was your age, but you really did fantastic. And one of the things that really stood out for me in your presentation was that you said that help is too late, often only when the threshold of peril is reached, are we offered help, and that's something that we see both in children's and adults mental health service, and it's just not acceptable. And I just want to go back to one of the points that was mentioned before. Chris, I think perhaps it was yourself that mentioned it, and it was around awaiting diagnosis for treatment or help. And in your work, in your research report, is that something that you find has to be clinically done before people are treated? Because I was just a wee bit concerned, and I just wondered where that had initially come from, that comment.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is how thresholds have risen before the clinical support is there. What we do know from other models is that there's an awful lot that can be done through therapeutic support, counselling support, early intervention work, to prevent, pre-crisis work. And I think that's probably a big part of the jigsaw where we're getting things wrong. We need to invest more. And I don't want to sound too cliche, but we need to invest downstream, because the manifestation of not acting early is, as Leah has spelled out, can be absolutely catastrophic. But Leah, I don't know if you wanted to come in terms of the thresholds and the question about the clinical interventions.
Absolutely. I think it's a really important point. What we usually see within CAMS is the requirement to meet that clinical definition of, for example, depression, of anxiety or other clinical diagnoses before a more formal care management pathway can be established. And that's usually where the confusion arises. There can be parents or guardians or educational welfare officers in schools who are concerned about children and young people with regards to the presentation of mental ill health or emotional dysregulation, and may make referrals. Parents, guardians may seek support from their GP to make that referral or other referral pathways. But children and young people can end up on waiting lists because until they get that first appointment to start the assessment, they don't have a diagnosis. They're just presenting the symptoms or the signs, so to speak. So there can occasionally be maybe some post hoc support being provided, again usually through the community and voluntary sector, but the more formal support pathways will not occur until a diagnosis is confirmed. And what we usually do find, and I know our legal team at NICCY hear this quite frequently actually from families, is that their child or young person may be experiencing crisis. They may take that child or young person to an ED, and undergoing clinical assessment. They do not meet the threshold of crisis. Even if that child or young person says, I do not wish to live, if after the assessment they're not meeting that specific clinical definition of what is crisis, then they will not be admitted into hospital. They may be seen by CAMS Crisis Services, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. It's all on the basis of prioritisation and what is presented need. So I think that's what we're trying to really gauge here, is that we appreciate this as a clinical model, but what supports can be offered in a more formal manner during that, I suppose, process of obtaining that clinical definition.
And that's really concerning, that it's multiple waiting lists essentially in the end, because, just because someone might have a diagnosis doesn't mean that they're going to be offered support. They're going to get diagnosed and then be sent to wait for that additional support. And we see that in the adults care a lot. So it's really frustrating to hear that is still the case, and something that we are certainly going to raise back with the department regarding a change of pathways, particularly for support. And I know the community and voluntary sector, specifically those who are not funded by the trusts, can operate in different ways. But it's something that we'll definitely take up. There's a lot of questions there for us. I'm not sure if you're aware about an issue that kind of brought to my mind was the under 18s and the crisis point interventions, and if you have done any work on the Children's Hospital. We had recently visited, and they had said that they didn't have a safe space for children who are at crisis point, perhaps suicidal, and they had to make that safe space. And the fact that they are needing it, more often than they ever done, really kind of struck home with how, there is a mental health crisis in under 18s, and the fact that that's such intense period. Have you come across that issue, or are you aware of that? Have done any work on that? It's just something you might want to be aware of.
Yeah, and I will pass back to Leah as well, because it was one of the standout bits of the report for me as well, around the lack of facilities. But I suppose I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but we do have a big, massive issue with regards to facilities generally, and we think with Ivy, with Beechcroft, the resources here are very, very limited. In terms of the real impact, and I mean, that's what I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking, you've probably been in the same situation yourself. How many times have you accompanied someone to an emergency department, or been in an emergency department where there's people in absolute crisis, and often they're accompanied by a police officer or police officers as a first response, and that is not the place that people in crisis need to be in. That's not the kind of care we need to be given. But it was, in the report it was specifically highlighted about the lack of youth-friendly, child-friendly facility.
We are very aware that when it comes to the Children's Hospice, as you say, that the presence, or rather the lack of presence, of appropriate facilities for children and young people presenting with crisis is there. The department is also aware of this. There was a Getting It Right First Time investigatory report undertaken into emergency departments, in which this was flagged very, very clearly by the expert team heading that report from England, and the fact that they also identified issues with lack of staff, and the staff there are passionate about their work, but there just would not be enough of them. There's also issues with the fact there's not ligature safe rooms or ligature free rooms that are available, and what also that report identified was specifically for children and young people who are neurodiverse. It's not a safe sensory environment, either for themselves or for their families. So it is something we're aware of, and it's something that we are concerned about. And we did identify as one of our recommendations. We want to hear from the department in respect of what are they aware of, either within the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, or what they can feed back to the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust in terms of improvement. In EDs for children and young people, but specifically, as you say, for crisis, and particularly off the back of that GRIFT report.
Well, thank you for the work on that. That is hopeful to hear that you are also pushing for it. I have my final question is around the neurodiversity issue that you raised. Actually, is that we are having more parents, who are waiting assistance and help, either for an autism diagnosis or support following diagnosis, whose children are spiraling into ill mental health. And is this we have, it's anecdotal evidence we get, but are you noticing yourselves any trends in the reaching out to you to highlight this service as well?
Very much, and I will invite Leah in again, because this was a very significant finding within the report. You'll know that the trends are showing that we have a crisis in terms of special educational needs. We have difficulties with regards to diagnosis and support, and again, there's a health and education piece here. I would even extend it beyond those two departments. We need to think about this in a much broader sense. But the trends are stark, and we see lots and lots of children and young people and families in despair, waiting, and then there's an issue there about dual diagnosis. In terms of how we're diagnosing mental ill health or anxiety and neurodiversity. But again, Leah, this was quite a significant part of the report, which you probably want to speak about.
Absolutely. What we find, it's very much an issue within our health and social care system. And again, to reiterate, staff are doing their absolute best. It is the system and a system design. When it comes to children and young people who are undergoing assessment for ASD, ADHD, of course, is a completely separate situation because we don't have that commissioned care pathway in situ. But when they're undergoing assessment for autism, and they're also being referred to CAMS. It's almost as if the two systems do not work hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
And that is where we see the delay, and children can be left, as you rightly say, languishing in the waiting lists for both. Again, it comes back down to the planning and design around the clinical model. The clinical definition around CAMS would be we're not, until a child has been appropriately screened and assessed, if they're also undergoing an autism diagnostic assessment, the signs and symptoms that they're presenting, particularly around emotional regulation, is that to do with undiagnosed autism, or is that also undiagnosed mental health, or is it both? But the systems, as I say, they essentially don't talk to one another, and that's something that really needs to be resolved. What we also noted, as I would argue a consequence of that in our report, is that there's increasing academic research, and not just in this jurisdiction, in the likes of the United States and Canada, to show that children and young people with undiagnosed ASD and ADHD will actually self-medicate, and they will self-medicate with alcohol or other substances like cannabis. Simply because they're not getting the appropriate supports they should be through their relevant health systems. So that's very much a trend we're aware of. For me, that should be, and for our office, it's a warning sign that services are not appropriately designed, and there must be some sort of issue within ASD diagnostic assessments as well as CAMS for that to present. So we didn't, obviously, within this report, examine that in depth. But it is something that is present, and as I say, this is something that's happening internationally too, so hopefully there's an opportunity maybe for the department, for the SPPG and for relevant trusts to look to best practice in other jurisdictions as a way to trying to fix this situation.
Thank you very much, that is quite helpful actually. Thank you very much again for presenting today.
Danny?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the whole panel for your presentation and your report, and particularly your presentation. That was very, very powerful. I absolutely concur with the Chair, and your answers as well. Early intervention, as you pointed out, Elodie, early intervention in young people and adolescent mental health will have a huge impact on the rest of people's lives. So this is a form of early investment and effectively invest to save. You're talking about how their exam results will shape their educational prospects, their employment prospects, so I absolutely get where you're coming from. I just wanted to concur with you as well, Chris, about the accident and emergencies. I've been in those environments, worked in those environments when people are brought in, and including young people in mental health crisis, and it is absolutely the inappropriate place for them. Not at all. We really need to address that.
Yeah.
We're bringing people into environments that are not appropriate and actually will make them worse.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions now. The first one is just on the outstanding, I think there was 32 actions in the still waiting action plan.
Yeah.
19 of them have been identified as remaining in the same status, no progress since 2023. 10 of them have been marked as completed, and 3 of them there were discrepancies arising from the updates provided in 2023 and the updates provided in 2025. So they had been categorised as being in progress in 2023, but in 2025 you were informed that they were completed. So just with all of those actions, the 32 actions, none of them seem to have moved at all since 2023.
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely frustrating, and I suppose that's the starting point. So bearing in mind that the report was 2018, so what's the maths there? That's 8 years. We simply haven't seen the progress that we needed to see. And Leah has spent a lot of time revisiting the SWAP action plan, and we've spoke with the mental health champion about this. We're constantly speaking with colleagues within health with regards to that. But yeah, it's very clear there that the progress has stalled. And we haven't seen, it is fair to say that we haven't seen even since 2023 the progress that we wanted to see.
The 2018 report.
Yeah. So you could probably talk at length about this again.
No, absolutely. I think starting point being that we do appreciate that within the first publication in 2018 and the subsequent monitoring reports, there were issues with regards to the devolved institutions were not sitting. There were budgetary constraints. There was confusion around who could make decisions in the absence of ministers and the executive more broadly, plus then also the pandemic. So we do take that in mind, but I suppose for us, given that the institutions were restored in February 2024, when we started to undertake this research and receive data and information back from SPPG colleagues and DOH officials in March, April of last year, it was, I think, a bit alarming to see that whilst there can be, I think, certainly the will and the understanding within department for the need for change, and that has always been clear since 2018, what we can actually try to monitor in terms of tangible change isn't really present, and that's why we did say 6 of those 32 actions we've coded as red. And it will come as no surprise it'll be the CAMS funding situation, it's the transitions planning, it's the regional care, crisis care services, all remain as outstanding. For us, and the report conveys this and the commissioners conveyed this too, it's a matter of when we come to progress, it's stalled and it's fragmented.
That's horrendous to hear. The 3 that were highlighted, as you've been told that they were in progress initially and then completed.
For those ones, we're not entirely too sure have that been coding issues, but as you say, there were a number of objectives that were returned as part of NICCY's progress monitoring several years ago. We were told one thing, and then when we received the updates last year, we were told they were actually completed. Whether that's because we're also aware that the swap, as we call it, our understanding with the department is that that's been embedded of future deliveries coming through the mental health strategy. So has there been maybe some confusion about what items or what actions go there? Our understanding is the department's working very hard to properly map the swap in the context of the mental health strategy. So it's something we're going to explore, we hope to explore and to monitor going forward. But then that then leads to the question of if there's a delay in the mental health strategy delivery, we'll see the consequential for the swap actions and the objectives that haven't yet been met.
Okay, that's certainly something we could look at. Can I ask, we've talked a lot about the child's rights framework and why that's important. Can you tell me what that would look like? Why is it important, and what would it look like about embedding child rights framework into mental health services?
I think one of the first things I would say would be around, in these times of difficult finances, we've seen in other jurisdictions how it can make things more efficient in terms of public spending. So we would advocate for child rights impact assessments to be carried out in terms of policy making. I would extend that to in terms of spending public money, because you don't need, it's well versed as to the financial situation and how we can use the resources that we have better. But in terms of child's rights based approach, for me, as I said earlier, I think the single most impactful thing that our government can do for our children is to incorporate the convention, and the articles within it. I think are a very helpful tool to government actually, and go beyond mental health and health. They go into education and other areas. But in terms of that framework, as I say, we've seen the impact in other jurisdictions. We're seeing it in Scotland, and although it is early days, it shifts the dial. It's a culture shift in the way we deliver public services and put children's rights at the very heart and at the very centre of policy making and spending public money.
If I could just add to that as well, particularly in the context of health services and mental health services, Elodie and Chris have spoken very strongly here about particularly participation of children and young people. What is very paramount, and not just within our research, is in other stakeholders' research as well, children and young people do not feel involved in decision making relevant to their care and their care management, and that's particularly acute when it comes to CAMS. And for us, if we incorporate this child's rights based perspective, as the Commissioner says, it does allow for that radical shift in what it means to have service delivery. But it could be as basic as a healthcare professional being more proactive and asking that young person, what is it that you think we can do for you? What would you like for us to do? How do they monitor then that sense of progress? And it then means we see young people as rights holders, and they're no longer something that's a passive or subject. Elodie today has outlined that so clearly. Young people have agency, young people have autonomy, and within the healthcare system, healthcare professionals obviously care about their jobs. Maybe it's just a slight change in their way of thinking about how can I ensure children and young people feed into this process around their care and their care management. It could be as basic as that.
Absolutely, and I completely agree. The report also outlines concerns about the delivery of the transformation agenda and the positioning of children's mental health services within this. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I need to be really candid and say that I've been concerned about the lack of visibility of children and young people generally in transformation. And it is something that we're talking to departmental officials about, and but unfortunately their needs or their visibility just it isn't seen. It feels like an afterthought. In terms of mental health services, again, it's well versed in terms of budget, and I don't want to lean too heavily into that argument, because it is one that's been well versed already. We have a mental health strategy which just doesn't have the budget to deliver, but even within that, the amount of resources dedicated to infant, child and youth mental health isn't at sufficient levels. Transformation, Leah, I'm going to throw the ball to you again.
Thank you.
You've been working on transformation for probably about 2 years now.
Yes, and I suppose Chris has outlined, there's various specific aspects of the transformation agenda for us, and I know it's been our Commissioner's concern since he was in post, and it's been something we've been looking at for the last 2.5 years. The transformation agenda, one of the concerns we identified was that there seems to be this context of a fresh policy intervention, a fresh policy intervention, a fresh policy intervention, and it's trying to understand where they connect, but most specifically, as our Commissioners outlined, where are children and young people within this. There does appear to have been marginalisation of children and young people in their services, whether that's the reset agenda, the 3-year plan, and now also we're looking at the neighbourhood model that was announced a few weeks ago. But within our report, we're essentially saying that progress has been made specifically through delivering together on broader system changes and broader services, but when we narrow that down to children and young people services and mental health services specifically, we don't see where that reform has happened. And that's concerning for us. And if this is going to be the future model of healthcare, we would support reconfiguration, we would support trying to bring community care as a centre point. It's also something that is more applicable for children and young people to have community care and community-led care for mental health. But we need to see more visibility of specific actions, specific indicators and targets for this. And we also need to see participation. We need to see children and young people feeding into this agenda directly. So for us, it's been a sincere concern. We also noted in the report that there seems to be some difficult terminology or problematic terminology. The reset agenda last summer talked about children's problems like ADHD, and we would not consider ADHD as being a problem for a child. It's a diagnosis for which that shapes how their life's perception would be, and they can get support for that. So lots of policy frameworks, unfortunately not the progression we would like to see, and we are hopeful that in the years to come, maybe with delivery, we can see more embedding of children and young people and children and young people's rights.
Just one other question. Just Children's Services Corporation Act, I think was passed a couple of years ago. A lot of the problems that we're seeing do seem to suggest that departments aren't working together, and particularly in this case, I think education and health, I think, appear to be very siloed.
Yeah.
What's your feeling on that? Is it not working, or are they?
Yeah, it's a huge frustration, to be brutally honest. We do have the act that was it came through the Assembly in 2015. So I do believe that it's lay somewhat dormant for around a decade. It's frustrating when I'm discharging my duties and looking at the effectiveness and adequacy of law and practice, and again in times of financial difficulty, that cross-departmental working can appear quite difficult. I think even looking at mental health, we've talked about health and education, but what about justice? What about communities? What about other departments? Because the mental ill health, as you know, impacts on so many other areas of life. We spend a lot of time looking at the Children's Services Corporation Act and what we can do to breathe a bit of life into it. I've thought, do we need secondary legislation? Do we need to make it stronger in some way? I've talked with PermSex, I've talked with various ministers, but I do think we need to shift the dial, and that shift, I think, needs to be coming from ministerial level and PermSec level. There appear to be barriers, and I did speak with Minister for Finance about this a while ago, about guidance for pooling and sharing of resources. Now, Finance have recently published some guidance around that, but it's the how bit. You know, how can we make it easier for departments and public bodies to share resources, even sharing information sometimes can be a barrier. I would say there are models of good practice. You know, there's always models of good practice. There's one in North Belfast, and you probably know about the Thrive project, for example, where you do see health and education and community all working together. But those examples are in pockets, and we need to do more to make that a routine. So look, I suppose in a roundabout way, I'm echoing the frustration. I think it is a huge concern for me, because I think that the intent of that act is very good. It's how we live that out and make it easier for departments to work more collaboratively.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. My colleague Linda Dillon was next in line. She was online and through no fault of her own has been discharged because of technological failings. So she's asked me to ask Elodie you a question. So you in your evidence touched on the fact that you wanted mental health part of the curriculum. So just
definitely.
if you could elaborate a wee bit, just how important do you think that would be if mental health was part of the school curriculum from primary school up, and also the impact that it would have on young people?
Yeah, for sure. I think that primary school level in the curriculum is so important, like having it right from the start. I think there are quite a number of reasons why this would be so powerful in providing long-term help to young people, and why I would say it's such a strong foundation for later on in life and for adulthood. From my reflections, there's also been support in this manner introduced successfully in other countries like Finland, Australia, Norway and Singapore, and there's evidence of such great impact. Firstly, there are improved academic outcomes if education on mental health issues are taught and dealt with in school. I know that us young people definitely would learn better when we're healthy and when we're well. Most schools only have limited teaching on mental health issues in LLW, and it's often quite a tick box approach. As part of the SSU&I executive, I support a revised LLW course being mandatory part of the curriculum to provide education on work, finance, RSE, mental health, rights and democracy. In our recent SSU&I Let Us Learn report showed that only just over 1 in 3 pupil respondents were doing LLW for GCSE, which I think there should be a lot more of a push for LLW on this education. Secondly, stigma is definitely a barrier to seeking support. And I think that if maintenance of mental health is immediately recognised in as much importance, as I mentioned earlier, as perhaps maths or English from primary school, it's demystified. Let's face it, every person is going to have to consider their own mental health in their lives. And I'm sure you could all agree, certainly more often than them having to deal with, as I said, fraction. This is evidenced by the Young Life and Time Study 2023 to 2024 that shows 45% of 16-year-olds has a probable mental health illness. 45% is quite a shocking figure. Thirdly, trauma-informed support is really important in understanding and treating child mental health in Northern Ireland. It can significantly improve long-term mental health outcomes. It is estimated that 61% of adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience here throughout their early lives. As we talked about, intervention as early as possible really is key. Generational trauma from the Troubles is also a massive factor here in Northern Ireland. And the quote, "Man hands on misery to man, it deepens like a coastal shelf," is from the Philip Larkin poem, This Be the Verse. Trauma needs to be examined and its impact on behaviour established individually and collectively for pupils. In adverse behaviour situations, instead perhaps of punishing people for behaviours, it may be better to examine why the behaviour is occurring and establish how best to treat the reason, rather than punishing the behaviour. Fourthly, and perhaps most persuasively for the purposes of finance, it is shown in studies that early school-based intervention and support is a highly cost-effective way to reduce the long-term economic burden of mental health illness on the state. At our roundtable event, I was talking to Professor Siobhan O'Neill, the mental health champion for Northern Ireland, and in her research, for every £1 of investment into mental health education, £5 is saved in future budgetary mental health spending, which I think this really highlights that it's economically beneficial, if anything, if not to help young people. Fifthly, poverty is a key driver in mental health, and incorporating skill-based support improves the likelihood of those needing the support to be directly reached. I understand that around 95% of teachers do not feel currently they are trained to support pupils in mental health. From my experience, I know that most teachers already do an incredible job and have informally had to support pupil mental health issues. I think that training should be formalised to support these teachers and their crucial role to be recognised financially and pastorally. Their informal contribution to helping pupils' mental health makes them part of the voluntary community heart that I sort of mentioned earlier, and their support is arguably being taken advantage of. Like, if you think about it, how incredible would it be for Northern Ireland to be proudly leading on mental health education within schools? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's, my colleague Linda will be listening in, and she will have said that was a very thorough answer and absolutely details how important it is and why it's important. So thank you very much. Next person on the list, Alan. Yourself, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to join with others in the committee in congratulating Elodie for her presentation. It was very powerful. And it's no mean feat to come into an environment like this and make a presentation, particularly with something that you're so passionate about. Reflecting back on my school days, and it wasn't yesterday, certainly wasn't yesterday, but the life then seemed to be much more simple and uncomplicated, and sort of mental health wasn't really something that you heard, or I never heard during my school journey. But having said that, I often reflect now and say, I wouldn't like to be a young person going through education now. I mean, I had none of these challenges, but the challenges now, the young people have to, the only challenge ever I had was whether to go behind a bicycle shed and have a puff of a shared cigarette. But young people now, they're facing the availability of drugs, of alcohol, marital breakups in the home, maybe an unstable family life, all these challenges that they're having to cope with, and also expectations, high expectations from the school, and maybe high expectations from their parents to do well. My mother left her educational journey when she was 12 years of age and went into full-time employment, which would have been the normal back in those days. And I remember when I brought home the paperwork to submit my name to take part in the qualifying exam, it was called then, went on to be called the 11+. My mother had no idea what this exam was or what the consequences of it were, but she signed a bit of paper and away I went. So there was, education back then really wasn't on the parental radar in the way that it is today. So Chris, what do you feel are the pressures that are contributing to, we've heard quite a lot about all these young people on the waiting list and all the rest of it, and they definitely do need to be seen quicker and more timely. But what are the issues that are contributing to it? Is there a degree of parental expectation in the schools driving young people? Is it social media and the bullying that goes on in social media? Is it, what are the things that are really, we need to tackle, as well as tackling waiting lists? We have to tackle the causes of this mental health crisis with our young people. And do schools at the moment, is there any, do schools have any sort of internal support mechanisms for young people in relation to their mental health, where they can go early if something's bothering them and maybe go and get it dealt with before it becomes a crisis with the young person?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I suppose the question you've asked are the things that keep me awake at night, to be quite honest. When I look at and I'm going to just go broad for a moment and then I'll bring it back. But just when we look at the situation here in Northern Ireland right now, high numbers of children in poverty, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3, you know, you're talking, or 1 in 4, 1 in 5 sort of statistic. With 19,500 children here who are legally recognised as homeless. That is absolutely mind-boggling when you think about the size of this place and that as a percentage. With more children in care than we have done, and possibly on record. And we had the Ray Jones report, which was published. It was published the day, actually, my announcement, so that's 2.5 years ago. I remember it vividly when my term started, and things have got worse. Things have got worse in terms of care. I really worry about, and Elodie talked about the legacy of the past, and I want to talk about that because the trends we're seeing this globally. You know, I'm kind of, I will watch documentaries and I will read and I'll talk to my colleagues in GB in Ireland and across Europe, and these trends are international. But I do think with regards to the legacy of the past, there is an extra layer. Related to that, I'm really worried about child criminal and child sexual exploitation. I wrote to the Assembly, the First and Deputy First Minister, and copied all the ministers in a number of months ago with regards to my worries in terms of the safeguarding of children here, and looking at things that we saw in for example, Rochdale and grooming gangs. In the south of Ireland, we saw children going missing, and I'm really worried that there's things here. We're sleepwalking into a disaster. So I think broadly we have all of these things in the mix. We can't ignore the availability of drugs. You know, the amount, some cliche again, it can be easier to get drugs than it can be a packet of sweets in some circumstances. We're seeing trends in different parts of Northern Ireland where children are being groomed and coerced, very, very young children, by criminal gangs, and those people are preying on a child's vulnerabilities. So I think it's all in the mix. I think, you know, when you talk about the good old bad old days, you know, I think, you know, there are many things that in many ways the world was a simpler place, but you know, in many ways it wasn't. You'll probably be thinking about social media and things like that as well, which is in the news a lot, and we're paying a lot of attention actually, looking at what is the best way to keep children safe online. What does a healthy relationship look like online and offline? So you have all of these things in the mix. So I guess to pinpoint what are the things, I just think there are so many things at the moment. We talked earlier about special educational needs and the impact that can have. Elodie, when you were talking, I was thinking about school avoidance. You know, so and that's a big issue, and related often to mental health. So I just think there are so many things, and that's why I suppose I go back to the child's rights approach and how we can make decisions, how we can improve our decision making in terms of the rights and best interest of those children. And your second question, sorry, was schools.
In the schools,
In schools, and please do jump in here because I feel like I'm on a bit of a monologue at the moment. But schools, Elodie, you said it, or I think you said often teachers are doing a really tremendous job in really difficult circumstances. And I should say that I visit lots of schools, lots and lots of schools. And we see again crisis in terms of special educational needs, budget, workforce, you know, pressure, lots and lots of pressure. And teachers and classroom assistant, teaching staff and non-teaching staff, extended beyond classroom assistants, are doing fantastic work.
They're trained to teach, aren't they? I mean, they're not trained, unfortunately, to act as a crutch in mental health.
I think your point, my answer to your point would be the support isn't there in schools, you know, because teachers are having to do so much. And when you talk to children and young people as well, whilst they say we need more resources in schools, we need to also reduce the stigma of going to a school counsellor or a school nurse. You've talked at this committee about nurses in schools, you know, so that there's so many issues. It's like peeling an onion. But I think to answer your question, is there enough support in schools? Definitely not. Leah, Elodie, please jump in, because I feel like I've kind of dominated this question.
Yeah, no, I think as someone in a school that I feel fortunate that we do have pretty good mental health services, a lot of the time, again, there's that stigma about accessing their service and sort of like a taboo, but also I think a lot of young people don't really know where to go or how to ask for help, which again, the curriculum is so important to make sure it's embedded not just in the curriculum, and then having that support on top can really ensure more of a focus on mental health services. But I think there's definitely such a stretch, and also pressure on teachers that don't have the training to carry out in a way that young people should have. So I think not just children should be like taught about mental health, but also teachers definitely need to receive training to be able to carry this out in a way that is effective.
And if I could just add, I think Chris has outlined so clearly the vast majority of issues that children and young people could experience that could cause issues for them with regards to their mental ill health. But what we also included in our report was that racism needs to be seen as a driver of mental ill health now among children and young people. Queen's University Belfast undertook research which found that children and young people from different racial, ethnic, religious, cultural backgrounds are experiencing racism in schools, whether that's through bullying type behaviours or actions, or feeling excluded, not feeling welcome, not feeling wanted. And what was really sad when you read this research is that parents were saying to researchers, we hear our children cry at home at night and we can't console them because, you know, they have been marked as being different and they are being stigmatised for being different. And I think perhaps there's something about, because this is really very much an emerging context for Northern Ireland, is there more action needed at DA and DOH levels about how do we counter racism and the associated mental health harm on children and young people in schools. But then with regards to what's existing presently around strategic frameworks, we know there's the emotional health and wellbeing framework in schools, policy intervention from DA, which is also undertaken in conjunction with DOH. What I want to end with, because Elodie has shown her perspective so well, I want to pay tribute to the NICCY Youth Panel, because when I had presented to them in February on this report, and I had started with asking them some questions, one of the questions I'd asked them was, when you think of mental health and mental health services, what would be your initial impression? And the vast majority of our panel in the room that day instantaneously talked about schools and whether or not mental health services are available in schools. They did not go about the GP or anything else, it was school, because they are in school and they see school as their first port of call for support. So their response that day was, some had said, as Ellie has done, it can be very much dependent on their school. Some had great experiences in school when they needed support, others not so much. So it seems to be the case the framework is in place, we know it's been embedded thoroughly. It's standardisation then of those supports across schools to make sure there's no disparity, because Elodie has spoken so well about her knowledge of her school. Other children and young people don't have, unfortunately, the same experience. We want to make sure that that's present for all.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And apologies, Elodie, that I missed your presentation at the start, but you have carried yourself extremely well here, and well done. It's as Alan said, it's not that easy. There's lots of adults who come here and are a little bit less forthright than you. Let's just put it that way. So honestly, really, really, really do mean that. Well done. Can I say, many years ago, so long ago that it's not relevant, I used to be a teacher, and when you were talking about mental health being embedded in the curriculum, I was kind of thinking, did we ever even address that? And we probably didn't. So if it's becoming more embedded in the curriculum, that's a great thing, because in my view, the more that young people are allowed to talk about issues, then the more they will be able to seek help or see what's happening in their own lives and recognise the issues. So I do think that is a really important point that you make, and almost like normalising being able to talk about mental health is huge, I think, for young people who maybe don't understand really what's going on, and maybe mum and dad don't really understand or have time to talk about it. And I think that is massively important. So I do think that is something that we perhaps as a committee can write to the Education Minister about and ask how this is being embedded but we'll talk about that afterward. But I do think that is something that's really relevant and something that we can do. A year ago or maybe more, I did an event at Banbridge Academy with Arlene Foster, and it was really interesting. We were all sort of sixth formers. What year are you?
I'm fifth year.
Fifth year. So they're all. I'm glad you talk about it in old money. I don't understand. I don't understand all these other years either. So that's really brilliant. You've recognised my inadequacy. And I did this event with her, and one of the things that we were talking about was bullying, and the bullying that goes on in social media, and the impact that has on young people's lives. And she made the point that, when she went to school, she went to school in the morning, she got the bus to school from rural Fermanagh into Enniskillen. She did whatever she was doing all day, and when she came home, she got the bus home, and if she wanted to actually contact her friends, she had to use the phone in the hall and ask her parents' permission. So that's the generation we're all from. But she said, like, her children have their phone, look, like all of us here, have their phone in their hand 24/7. It's always available. And she then asked the question about how many felt that they had been bullied, either through either a social media platform or WhatsApp, Snapchat, whatever is your choice in all of these communications things. And almost 2/3 of the young people in that room said they'd been bullied. So is social media as huge an issue as I think it is? And if it is, what would you tell Keir Starmer? Would you control social media? Would you, and would that be useful? Because the government are talking about, if not banning social media for under 16s, they're actually talking about, placing controls on it.
Yeah.
So if you had Keir Starmer sitting here, imagine, and what would you tell him? Because I do think that's a really relevant question, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
By the number of young people, particularly young girls.
Definitely, yeah. No, I know from my experience, like, social media is such a big thing for cyberbullying, and just the fact that everyone's on social media all the time, there's just no escape. Like, as you mentioned, like, from when you're younger, it's like, it's the phone in the hall, but we're always on that phone. I think, from my experience, Snapchat is definitely one of the worst platforms for that. Everyone can be added to a group chat at whatever time, and people can make stickers of each other or just posted like whenever. It's crazy how that's like a reality now, and I think a lot of young people don't even like really recognise that as a bad thing. It's sort of just normalised. As someone who's done quite a lot of work on online safety, and I just completed my 2-year term on the NSPCC Voice of Online Youth, the main focus from us has been regulation. We've done a lot of work with Ofcom and just making sure that young people that there is that regulation, and especially content online can also sort of be like bullying within that, just constant checks. Like, we spoke to Peter Kyle, Secretary of State for Technology, at the time when Australia had banned phone, like social media, and we mentioned it to him, and our outcome was that it's not a good idea, because there'll just be more of a need, like more of a requirement for it. Like, it's just like there's confetti everywhere. Like, it's just, I don't think it's really like sustainable.
So as a young person of 15, 16,
yeah,
you're saying that controls on social media would be
definitely
good, but banning social media would not be good. Because it's always, I mean, I always hate the idea of people like us sitting in rooms up here doing things to people without talking to people.
Yeah, young people in the conversation.
So I kind of think it's really important to hear your voice. Do you think that there's been occasions where your own personal mental health has been impacted by bullying, or your friends have mentioned this as an
I
issue.
think again on Snapchat, social media is such a bad one for that. Also, I think even apps like TikTok and Instagram, there's just such an unreliable or like an unattainable standard for young people that they feel like they have to align to, and that
we all want to be thin and wonderful.
And also sort of on a materialistic level, like you're only like cool if you have a certain thing, and it's such a pressure that's constantly put on young people, and it's definitely such a big impact on mental health. I think also a lot of from my work, increased sort of improved reporting should be like encouraged to young people, because often a lot of the time I think with Snapchat it's a bit hopeless and people just feel like there's no point in reporting things that have happened to them online because it's not going to go anywhere. But I think those systems need to be sort of changed and more accessible to young people so that the tech companies can really push to help.
Do you actually believe, sorry, I hate to say, I'm not interrogating you because it's just intensely interesting for me. Do you actually believe that the social media, sort of like the chief executives of all the social media companies take any heed to this? Because I actually, like one time in the European Parliament, I was actually able to question Mark Zuckerberg, and it came surrounded by an absolute army of legal people to actually protect him from your questions as he was doing it. And I must say, like, despite all the questions, I don't think anybody got anything particularly new or exciting or different out of him. And I'm like you, I really worry that we can't get, and you talk to people, politicians here, and I'm not crying poor me or anything, but we've all been the subject of social media hounding, and some of it very, very personal. But you report it, and so what? So like there is a lot to do. Can I, Chris, just before the chair shouts at me, can I just ask a question? Because I was just looking through this, and in 21-22 there were 15,279 referrals to CAMS, 10,363 accepted. And by 23-24, 12,680. Now I'm presuming the drop is from sort of like a post-COVID period to now, but it still seems to me that 12,680 young people in our community needing an intervention, because there are interventions before CAMS, is a very significant number of young people.
Yeah, it's alarming. I just want to tip my hat to your previous question, because I think it is really, really important that we have those conversations around screen time and social media. Elodie, it might be useful if we sent through the NSPCC report that you were involved in.
Definitely. We made a manifesto and a youth charter.
Yeah, and in fact the Deputy First Minister, when I met with her recently, was really interested in this topic, and interestingly her position was like yours. We need to hear the voice of young people in this, because they are digital natives. In terms of the data, I'm gonna pass our data expert analyst. There's no better person to answer the data question than Leah, so I'm going to ask you just to delve in there.
Yeah, certainly. So, really excellent question. I would take a step back and say, firstly, when we look at the waiting list, because you've noted a really important point between 21, 23 and that time frame. When it comes to waiting list data, we can see fluctuations from 2020, 2021 and onwards, and that might initially suggest, okay, this is wonderful, the waiting lists have dropped, the waiting lists have declined. But that's actually because of a number of systematic changes and interventions that were made, things being paused, but also paramount because of the fact that we believe children and young people weren't getting referred during the COVID years. The system had to be paused because of the other pressures existing in the healthcare system. When it comes to referrals, you're absolutely spot on. The numbers of referrals would be concerning. And again, I think our report was trying to find the data and hopefully use the data to suggest where our interests could be for future work going forward, or how we can inform broader policy agendas, how we can link in with stakeholders. So we were not able to really do the deep dive to understand that level with regards to referral processes and numbers. But the fact that they remain so persistently high, I would refer to chapter 2 of the report, where we walk through what we call the mental health landscape and the various issues and challenges children and people are experiencing. there is something there between what we know are the issues and the root sources not being addressed that then results in more children and young people having to be referred. So we know there are root causes. The report does not extend to looking at those root causes, but the fact the numbers remain high we would be concerned by. And I think that then comes back to the idea of, is this a system under pressure where demand is outstripping supply by way of the personnel and the workforce capacity that's there? What changes need to be made there to support staff first and foremost in delivering these services, but then the children and young people who need access to those services. And I think the rates of referrals being high then links back into the waiting lists, and again, fundamentally, as this report outlines, it's the community and voluntary sector plugging the gaps in between referrals and first appointments and so on.
Well, we all know really good projects where the community and voluntary sector are doing amazing work to actually help young people. Why is there only, like, in all of those years that are quoted, the stats, there's only a 60 odd percent roughly acceptance of referrals?
Again, this is something that we identified in the report, and the fact that referral rates seem to be on decline. Is that because GPs are making referrals based on what is being presented before them, what child or young person is saying, or a parent or carer are saying? Is it an educational welfare officer in a school setting? Referrals can be made because people fundamentally are concerned, or the child or young person themselves express something that makes them think I need to seek support, or they express it in an appointment and the healthcare professional says I need to refer you onwards. I think it comes back to the previous question for your colleague Nuala around the clinical model. A child or young person may be referred, and if they don't match that clinical definition of the need, they're not going to be accepted into CAMHS.
Are you talking about where, because I've had constituency cases where young people who were maybe being referred for autism could also not be referred to CAMHS?
Yes, that does come up a lot. Our commissioner's been briefed on it for many times. We've had different meetings with stakeholders. It's something that comes through with our legal investigation team very strongly in their casework as well. The systems do not talk to each other. So a child or young person may be referred for CAMHS, may be referred for the ASD assessment diagnosis process, and they will be stuck languishing on either side of that. But then fundamentally, if they...
It's really difficult though to get a resolution to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I find that, I don't know whether anybody else has found that as a difficulty. That has been a real difficulty. Folks, thank you so much. And Elodie, you're a star.
Future Commissioner Elodie.
You're a star.
I don't think any of us will be surprised if we see Elodie back in his building in some shape or format. Alan Robinson, you're last.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris, Leah and Elodie. As Diane has said, that you are an absolute leader in your field, and your school is very lucky to have a champion for young people. And I do wish that there were many more people like you in many more schools across Northern Ireland. You are an absolute credit, a credit to your family. Just on the educational curriculum, do you feel, Elodie, that a lot of the focus currently within schools tends to be on, when they're talking about mental health, that it is more reflective of the symptoms of mental health and how you can get treatment and support, school counselling? And do you feel that there is a gap in schools providing support in order to deal with the causes? And do you also feel that some of those causes that are certainly within the school environment currently is behavioural issues such as exclusion, online bullying, cyberbullying?
Yeah, I think from my experience in school, it's, as I said earlier, it's often a tick box approach. There's often like maybe an assembly or two sort of on mental health, and that's really it. From my experience, there's more of a focus on the education about the services and how to access services, but I think there should be more of a focus on like those symptoms and like to identify what mental health issues sort of, or like I know a lot of people even with like help from like online sort of, or like self-diagnosing maybe themselves, but I think having knowledge of the symptoms and what certain mental health issues sort of like have would be very helpful to young people to sort of know that and reach out for help. Like the sort of the mirror analogy that I sort of mentioned earlier, I think knowing what, like holding up the mirror and knowing what those mental health issues are like is definitely really important.
Yeah, Alan, could I just add just something that I don't think I've mentioned or given the attention it does deserve is exam stress. You know, this is a big thing. As long as I've been involved in youth work and my role as Commissioner, exam stress comes up as a big thing. I think you'd mentioned earlier transfer as a transition period, a significant period as well. But as I said earlier, I speak with children and young people all the time. I think and I'm not saying there's no place for exams, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot of pressure on children and young people, teachers, parents, you know, and it's a big pressure cooker. And if you recall, when we come out of COVID, many people said that we need to focus more on well-being. There was many things after lockdowns that we all said we would do more of, and I think we've slipped back into old patterns. And you know, we were talking earlier about I think we were talking about teachers. Maybe you said it as well, Elodie. And again, I don't want to be cliche, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So if there's this pressure in schools and exams are part of that and teachers are responding to that, teachers are under pressure, they're going home, it's just like a big melting pot. But you will hear a lot about exam stress and pressure and that pressure to succeed. And there's a conversation there to be had as to what success looks like. And I know there's lots of conversations in education around curriculum and all as well, but it is a factor, Alan, in schools that I don't think that I've mentioned up until now.
And Chris, your report, or the sort of the foreword in it does make reference to the increasing referral rates, the increasing numbers of children being referred at a younger age. And the big drivers of that, you know, that's obviously there's a range of issues there, but do you feel that the online world that kids are living in nowadays is one of the big drivers for kids that are increasingly having to be directed towards CAMHS and increasingly having mental distress at such a young age?
It's a factor, but I wouldn't say that it's the be all and end all. You know, if we talk about online bullying, I think bullying is an issue, online and offline, and how we deal with bullying and how schools are equipped to deal with bullying. I think we need to do more work, and I would love to do more work in my office. If I did have more resources, you know, around screen time, around social media, we need more evidence, you know. And look, I do ask children regularly about what does healthy screen time look like, at what age should you be able to access a phone, for example, and we shouldn't lose sight of the positives, you know. So there are many positives with regards to the online world and a source of support. And in fact, a young person yesterday at an event in Glengormley told me about how the use of social media during COVID was such a positive impact on his mental health. You know, so I think there's more to it. I think we need to recognise there is an issue. I do think there's a societal issue though. And I would probably put my hand up and say, well, actually, has using the screen too much affected my mental health? Probably at times. Who doesn't? Who in this room could say that they don't spend too much time on screens and how it affects your frontal lobes? And we know more about neuroscience, but I think that's affecting us all. But just to answer your question, it's a factor, but it's not. I don't think it's the main driver.
I can imagine Elodie is the type of girl that, if she's seen a young person in her school who is in emotional distress, that she would use that one sentence to say, "Are you okay?" And as we know, that one sentence can be so important to a child that feels isolated, vulnerable, and fearful within a school. I have some personal experience in this, and I have my own child, and I hope she forgives me for maybe talking on a very personal perspective today, but I have a child who went through primary school, a very happy, bubbly child who could not wait to burst out of the car in the morning, get into school, and burst back home at night, excited for the next day ahead. But when she transferred to secondary school, she has been the victim of significant bullying to the point where she now requires counselling. And I suppose I, as a political representative, my role is to try to fix people's problems, and it has been a struggle, I can assure you, to try to fix my child's problems.
Yeah, Alan, I just want to acknowledge, well, I suppose thank you for sharing that, and I hope your daughter is as good as she can be, and if there's anything we can do, please do lift the phone. But I do think that bullying has been an issue that we've long talked about in forums such as this. We have an Anti-Bullying in Schools Act, and we have a team. Again, back to resources, I don't know if that team has the resources that it needs to provide the support in schools, but it's an issue that I see up and down, you know, all over Northern Ireland and different communities, and it's an issue that we face. You know, we were talking earlier about being the part of the generation that used the phone in the hall. I was part of that generation too, and you know,
permission before you did it.
Absolutely, you did. And bullying was a thing then. You know,
yes,
it's such a huge issue, and it is again the manifestation of that: mental ill health, anxiety, school avoidance. You know, so we do need to spend more time talking about bullying and taking a lead from people like Elodie. Let's hear from young people. What are the solutions? How can schools be better equipped to deal with this issue that has plagued us for way too long?
Someone of my vantage, Chris, I mean, I would have looked upon, certainly in the time in which I was at school, would have looked at bullying as physical contact. But now, in the case certainly of my child, there is no physical contact. It's exclusion, it's demeaning, it's laughing. It is just behaviour that people would say is very low level, but it's the cumulative effects that it has on a child. And I suppose in my role as well, you know, I have comforted, you know, families who have lost loved ones, young people to suicide. I did so just recently, and my greatest fear is that one day someone will have to comfort me.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, look, as I say, if there's anything we can do for your daughter, please do lift the phone.
Okay, so I mean, this has been a difficult conversation, and it's ended at a very difficult point for Alan there. So again, appreciate Alan for sharing that, and just I suppose highlighting how important open conversations are. I mean, we've went way beyond what we should have been talking about here, but we've had some very important conversations. And as politicians, I mean, I sometimes we despair because at this committee you rarely hear things are working well and things are improving and all the rest of that. And today has been no different. But I think it has been a very useful moment to shed some light just exactly where problems exist, where we need to do much better to try and improve. And I mean, if this assembly can't do work to protect our children, then we're certainly failing society, and particularly our children. So I want to thank all of you. The evidence we've got today has been full of expertise, full of data and figures, and also full of emotion and power. So again, all three of you I want to thank. In particular, Elodie, I want to thank you. Alan said you were a powerful advocate for your school. I think you're a powerful advocate for children right across the north. And I mean, as I say, I don't want to be patronising, but none of us here will be surprised if we see you back here giving us orders and years to come. And as I say, we have a job to all of you in terms of follow-up and scrutiny. And I mean, I think after today we will all be taking this issue with a wee bit more seriousness than we have. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Good luck, and Elodie, if you're doing exams, good luck in those.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so I mean, we've agreed to do an awful lot there in terms of follow-up. So I mean, I think that is a very important issue that we perhaps need to just keep a bigger focus on. Okay, we'll move on then to item number 7, written briefing from the department in terms of implementation of maternity service. So we have a written briefing, page 301 of the main pack. I think we should share the briefing with the Royal College of Midwives. I know I had an engagement with the Royal College of Midwives on Saturday at my party's our day, so there are a number of issues in terms of the implementation of the report that they are still concerned about. Safe staffing is obviously an issue, so what I think we should do is share that briefing with them and then await their response. But I mean, it's clear it's just another issue where we need to see more progress, if people are content with that. I'm going to skip item number 8 and leave that till the end. We're going to go into closed session for that. Item number 9 is correspondence. So can I refer members to the correspondence in the main pack, page 386, and then there is also the index with suggested actions at 388. So the can I refer members to the letter from the independent healthcare sector at page 396. I have actually got an email from Pauline Shepherd as this meeting has progressed. So I mean you can see from the response there's no resolution to the minimum wage, which I think we mean, and there's probably no resolution to any of those issues. I'm kind of trying to open this letter. I mean, it'll obviously be tabled next week, but I think it might be important if we what I'll suggest is we'll go on to some of the other things and I'll come back to that one.
Just a slightly different element of that. So I've been contacted by a number of domiciliary care workers, both who work with the trust and who work in the independent sector. And the issue is really important and very grave for them, in that leaving aside the issue of the living wage, the issue of fuel, particularly for those domiciliary care workers who work in rural areas, who travel long distances to see people, and the lack of help at a time when fuel prices are hugely inflated. And I was wondering if the committee would agree to write to the Minister around this particular issue, because it is having an impact, and as one of them said, like it's really only they're committed to the people they look after, and of course we are relying on that as a society, that commitment, but we really need to look after them at a time when it is costing a lot of money for them to put fuel in their car to actually, and particularly in rural areas, to go to see those people.
Yeah, and we have tabled a motion on that issue. It is a very, very important issue that's going to get worse. So I absolutely think the committee.
I think that the issue is not going to resolve itself quickly. So I think that it becomes even more important, because it's not going to resolve itself that quickly. So
I think I've opened this letter from Pauline Shepherd, so it's in response to the Minister's letter. What I think is best to do is that we table it next week, and we'll explore those issues. But I mean, this is an issue that we have raised here on numerous occasions. So in terms of the Trust's engagement with the sector, in terms of pay, and the point about the fuel increases is an ever-growing one. So there just seems to be more problems rather than more solutions, and I do think the Minister really needs to take a focused look at this, and I think that's probably what the tenet of Pauline's letter to us is, that the officials perhaps aren't just giving him the full totality of the picture and the information. So I think it's an important sphere of our health care sector, and we just don't want to see these problems getting worse. We want to see them getting better. The other thing then, in terms of the correspondence, so there's correspondence from the Department regarding the outcome of the public consultation on key issues for the childcare sector at tab 9.6399, and just wondering if anybody has any concerns or issues in relation to that. So they're just setting out public consultation. There are going to be some changes in terms of ratio for the childcare sector, for responsible people and the number of children. So I mean, there's consultation, so we can all respond to it as a party and individually as well if we want to take that. The other thing then, so there's correspondence from the department regarding the update in the tobacco and vapes bill, page 3 of the table paper. If anybody's any comments? None. So I mean, just a couple of things I wanted to mention myself. The Youth Assembly have written to us in relation to involvement in legislative scrutiny, so it might be worth asking if there were any of the legislations that are ongoing here for the Youth Assembly to take a look at. I mean, we've heard from young people and the importance of young people, so some of the things we're doing aren't specifically around young people, but they may have a view, so I think that would be important as well. And then just in terms of the letter between the Minister and the Minister of Education in terms of the youth schemes, I think it's important that we just kind of urge both ministers not to try and let it issues like that escalate again. I mean, again today we raised about working between two departments to help our young people, and I think particularly within health and education we would like to see a greater working relationship. So I don't know if anybody has any other issues they want to raise, Dan.
Yeah. So it's I've lost it now. 9/17, the cancer research issue. I know I keep going on about this, but I'm never going to let this go. We have huge cancer waiting times. They are impacting. Cancer Research UK tells us that this is impacting on the way and the outcome for patients in Northern Ireland. And I think maybe it would be useful to have a bit of a session on this to try again and see what, for example, Cancer Research UK would recommend. They have called for an emergency plan to deal with cancer waiting lists. I spoke a little bit about this last week when Professor Mark Taylor was here, because I don't think that what we're doing now is enough. And if we don't actually address this issue, we are failing people. So I suppose I would like the committee to in open session to look at the issue again. But secondly, I think maybe we should consider a committee motion which actually calls on the Health Minister to have some sort of an emergency approach to cancer waiting times and how we can actually get on top of it. The fact that only 5% of women are seen from they notice something wrong until they see a surgeon or a consultant for prospective breast cancer. I mean, it's appalling. The actual target is 100%. I mean, we're not even anywhere near it. And even though we're seeing slightly more patients, it's our outcomes are falling back, because. So I do think that we should consider a committee motion on this. And secondly, I think we should have maybe Cancer Research in to talk to us about it. Yeah,
and I mean, last week we did agree to prioritise red flag as part of our yes. committee's work, so that this is what we should be doing. It might be better if we had scheduled a meeting with Cancer Research to help formulate our committee motion.
That's okay. I'm happy with that, but I just think that we cannot allow the Assembly to go into summer recess without having again put some more pressure in the system to see what can be done to try and resolve. And I think it's an outrageous. I've used the phrase before. It's immoral. It really is one of the things that I don't understand. When we know that early diagnosis, we know that early treatment, we know that the sooner you get to this, the better the outcome. But we're not doing that. Only a third, less than a third, 28 or 29% in the last figures, received treatment within the 62-day period.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think everybody's going to be in agreement that we schedule a an early briefing session from cancer. I mean, it may be worth some of the other cancer charities
I'm not
as
precious
well.
at all. It's
So,
just that they consistently raise the issue.
Yeah. So,
I'm sure that if we as a committee are going to bring forward a motion, and no difficulty with it because it is outrageous and unacceptable what people are getting put through, particularly red flag. But I think in fairness, as a committee, if we're going to call for a motion, I think we also have to indicate what services we would be content to see being cut back to accommodate extra resources being committed to cancer treatment. You know, I think you just can't go into the chamber and whistle in the wind and call for something without having a clear idea about where you feel the Minister is going to find a resource to deliver it.
yeah, and it might not even be, I mean, our ask might not be resource. And so, I mean, I think in all of these things, what we need to do is have just a discussion about where we're at and what the possible solutions are. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but solutions might not be cutting other services. You know, there might be other possible solutions out there. So I mean, I think rather than get it into discussion today about what the committee motion might look like, I think we take the evidence first, and then on the back of that we can have a discussion about what the motion should look like. So if we can, I agree with Dan, I'd like to get that done before the summer recess. Okay, so Colin, sorry, yes.
Yeah, Chair, I just want to check. I wasn't able to make the meeting last week, and I asked us to write to the department for some information about the programme for government targets, but I think we said that maybe Mark Taylor might have given us answers last week. Did we get anything from him on that front that I could go back and look through Hansard for it, or would it be useful to write to the department now on that in advance of having the cancer charities in? Because obviously the programme for government targets were established and agreed at such a low level that only 7 million of the 80-something million was spent, and the rest was then used to default the overspend within the department. So,
well, Colin, we have asked for that. We haven't got the response yet from the department. Okay. But if you did look through the Hansard, there was a bit of a discussion on that last week. So, you know, between the two of those, we'll get those figures.
Have the answers. Yeah. Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you, Chair. Cheers.
Okay, so are we content then with the suggested action? Sorry, I mean, one thing I should highlight, obviously, the BMA announcement that hospital doctors are to be balloted for industrial action. I think it's worthy of highlight again. I mean, all of this comes down to resource, but let's hope that that issue can be resolved. And is everybody's content then with the actions? Okay, so any other business? Item number 10. Just want to put on public record as chair of the committee on behalf of all of us my thanks to Jonathan and Angela. So we've been informed very sad news at the start of the committee that this is going to be Angela and Jonathan's last day at committee with us. I want to thank you both for your work on the committee over the past number of years on the committee, certainly from my point, the last year, and to wish you both well. Jonathan's moving to the Education Committee and Angela's to the Bill Office, so yes, will definitely be sadly missed. I need a team of people to keep me right, and you definitely have been two of the team who have hopefully kept me right in my role, so yes, they'll definitely be missing in the committee.
Were they headhunted or did they ask to get away?
No, they both have been promoted, and with their obvious talents, I mean, that's clear why they've been promoted. So I think that's important to recognise that. Good work. Forward work programme, draft forward work programme is at page 700. I'm going to ask Keith just to give a bit of an update on some of the upcoming meetings and visits.
Thanks, Chair. Just again to advise members just for the next couple of weeks to let you know what's happening. Next Wednesday we do have a scheduled visit down to St Francis Hospice along with the Perm Sec. If members, thanks to members who have got in touch to say they're able or not able to go, but if any other member wants to go to that, if they could let me know in the next day or two. In relation to then the following week, we have 2 meetings on that week. One meeting is on at lunchtime with the General Medical Council, just a bit more about their work. So invites will go out to that. That's on Tuesday the 12th of May. And then on the Wednesday the 13th, the committee are due to go to Balmoral show. So all access has been provided to all members. So you'll get a bit more information about that next week. And you also get your wristbands and the access Balmoral show on that Wednesday as well. And then the final thing I just wanted to mention, Chair, was the proposed visit to London to look at best practice in primary care and neighbourhood model. So it's on the 3rd of June. So again, thanks to members who have got in touch to say they can or can't make it. But again, any other members who would like to go along to that, if they could just confirm with me in the next couple of days so we can start making the practical arrangements for that, that would be great.
Okay, everybody content with that?
Yep. Can I just ask, that neighbourhood model roundtable event, is it on the same day? In 4th of June?
So it's on the Thursday.
It's on the Thursday.
It's on the Thursday, so the visit to London is on the Wednesday.
Gotcha.
So it is, and then the mental health roundtable event on neighbourhood is on the Thursday morning.
Okay, so members, just before we go on to closed session, date, time and place of next meeting is 29th, room 29, sorry, Thursday, 7th of May, 2 p.m. So I'm going to ask then that we just go into closed session to consider the formal